All right, guys. First off, thank you for understanding. I'm going to try to keep this pretty short and sweet for you. I know there's a lot of stuff to get through. Um, Kind of reminder, because we're not going to have any mock lessons present tonight, you will need to be prepared if you are anyone in groups 1 to 6 for next week. We will see time-wise if we can get through all 6. If we cannot, we may push a couple of you to the following week. So hopefully we can at least get through most of them so we can kind of stay on track, get caught back up, and get ourselves ready for the following weeks to come. Okay. You will have in this recording, you will have 3 new vocabulary words and 6 skills for your phonics notebook. So if you have any of those papers and you want to kind of get those typed in, let's kind of get that figured out before. So if you need to pause, go ahead and do so. Otherwise, just kind of listen in. If you do not have any of those printed out, I will have some next week. If you want to kind of catch up on some and just take some notes today, or if you want to print them out yourselves, that may be just a little easier for this time. And then next week, I'm going to come with a whole bunch of them. So hopefully you can take what you need for the rest of the semester. Then we won't have to worry too much about not having them if something like this comes up. Hopefully this will be the only time we have to do something like this, but we'll just have to wait and see, kind of weather-wise too, what is happening. So also our anchor charts that we kind of started last week, we'll talk more about them next time we meet together and we'll get that all figured out. Okay, so kind of for today, just a little bit of agenda. You're welcome to follow along on the slides or pause anything as needed. We will not get to mock lessons, obviously. And then the in-class activity, it's kind of going to be your out-of-class activity to make up for attendance points for today. And I will discuss that when we get to that section here. So kind of just thinking a little bit about patterns. Patterns, they're all around us, okay? What is a pattern? Where can you find it? What do you know about patterns? We're going to look at that in terms of phonics and some of the skills we might see today. So, spelling patterns. Do they help us read? Right? Are sounds and spelling, do they have relationships together? So a spelling pattern is a group of letters that represents a sound. Okay? In phonics, this is a method of instruction that teaches kids to read. We use sound symbol relationships and letter patterns. Okay, so these two kind of correlate together, but know that there is a difference between spelling patterns and phonics. Okay, phonics involves more than just simple spelling patterns. There's a lot of other things that we are looking at there. Okay, so thinking about some spelling patterns, if things are spelling based in that they're patterns, okay, these are things that have the same sound and the same spelling. So you're looking for 2 letters working together. The letter combinations make the same sound in each word. It's easy to see with this pattern, but you have to think about the sounds too, okay? So in this case, you might have words like tree and bee, okay? Thinking of like the insect bee. And the sounds, the pattern is exactly the same. In this case, the sound is also the same, but there are some patterns that may have the same letters, but that doesn't necessarily make the sounds exactly the same. So there's something to kind of look out for. But here's some more examples like train, pane, plane, plate, day, play. Okay, so some of those long vowel sounds there. So some different spellings of those things, but sometimes they all make that long A sound, even though they don't necessarily look exactly the same in all of those cases. Okay, so take a second right now and you can pause it if needed. Looking at the words that are listed here, what I want you to do is sort these words by their common spelling. Okay, so like, for example, looking at the word tree, speech. Those two might go together based on what they look like because they have that same EE in it. So again, pause if needed so you can think about that and work through those. I'm guessing most of you, as you got to these, came up with these as your patterns. Okay, you're just following what you can see visually, not necessarily the same sounds you hear in all of them, but sometimes when you look at that visual is really helpful for students. And a lot of times that's the first thing that students are looking for. Well, it looks this way, but we're not necessarily thinking of the sound all the time. So, but this is a great thing for students to look for, especially when they are first starting to read. Finding decodables and things like that that follow some of these patterns so they can feel a little more confident in their reading skills is a wonderful thing to do. Okay, now we can also have spelling patterns that are sound based. Okay, so these are things that sound the same but are spelled differently. For example, like the long A sound. We have train, plane, eight, plate, gate, pain, day, play, eight. Okay, there are a lot of different spellings of this long A sound. But again, they're all making that same sound. Even though they look different, they have that same sound we're producing with our mouth. Okay, same thing with that long I, pie, y, thigh, okay, and the list goes on there. Again, the same sound we're hearing, but it's spelled in a variety of different ways. And again, one of the reasons why the English language is so confusing and complicated for a lot of kids to learn, but teaching these patterns together, listening to the sounds, can help students as well. Okay, again, taking a look at these words, you're going to sort them by their common spelling. This time you're focusing more so on what the words sound like, what sound you hear being produced. Again, go ahead and pause for a second while you get those sorted. I'm sure most of you came up with these sortings of words. Okay, you're listening to the sound that is being produced, and these are the sounds that are kind of connecting together. Um, so again, if you're looking at that as a young reader, think, oh, these words don't even look the same, but they sound the same. They have that same sound in them. So that's again why it's confusing, and again why we are teaching something called word families, which we're going to talk about here next. Okay, so in your phonics notebook, first skill you have for today is the skill of word families. And I'm sure any of you in lower placements or you've had different familiar work with students who maybe homework, things like that. Word families are something you hear a lot of, and that has been around for a really long time. That's a skill that we continue to keep working on. Okay, word families can be read, words that can be read and spelled easily because their rhyme is spelled the same and pronounced the same way. Okay, so rhyme, in this case, not saying like the words rhyme together. This rhyme is like the ending of the word. Okay, these are easier, something students can automatically read to encode or decode the words. Like you might have a word family of at, cat, bat, sat, bat. Okay, it's producing the same sound with the same spelling. Okay, so these word families, if a lot of times we list them out, these different word families in younger grades where students can see, okay, these are all the things that we have here. I'm going to try to play the video. I know sometimes it doesn't necessarily work with you being able to hear it while it's on this WebEx system. So if it does not, just kind of skip through this part and then go back and watch it on your own. And you know what? I don't think it's going to let me even play it anyway. Here we go. Okay, so obviously the list goes on, and if you want to continue watching more of it, you are more than welcome to do so. But really, it's just showing that these are the things we can literally flip through a book like that and produce all these different words that all fit in the same word family. So important for students to see that. And it's really great for those beginning readers. Like I said, you can find a lot of decodables that help them with this. to practice that repetition over and over with those word families. Okay, so this is that phonological awareness. It plays a part in this. Okay, we think of onset and rhyme connects with those word families. Okay, so remember, phonological awareness is that huge, big umbrella that all these little pieces are listed underneath. So phonics is a piece of phonological awareness. Onset and rhyme, doing all of those different things are all part of this huge, big term we call phonological awareness. So something, just kind of that overall umbrella of things there. Okay, so word family or phonics skill. Okay, sometimes we get into kind of a little complicated mix here where we have some word families that might end with like final E or magic E, some kids call it. Um, so what do we say? Is it a word family or is it a phonics skill? Okay. Um, these are things that I would encourage you to teach as word families, just because some of the word families don't necessarily follow having that, long A sound if there's like the A final E. So teaching them as word families, we are able to sort them out just a little bit better and understand the actual sounds those pieces are making instead of looking at it as that phonics skill of final E. Now, sometimes you may have kids that automatically go to that final E and they use that skill, which is a great skill for them to have. But encourage them, give them some examples where things don't necessarily work that way and encourage them to then think about the word family if that is something that the final E sound doesn't quite make sense with what I'm saying. Okay, again, is this a phonics rule or spelling pattern? We have short vowels, final E, okay, all of these different things, the list goes on and on. So we want to focus on these word families, think about these spelling patterns. And sometimes it just gets really messy with all the different phonics rules that are out there. So how do we think about these things? How can we help students through them? Think about the rule breakers. So if there are any words that we would say, oh, well, this one doesn't quite fit the pattern or the rule, take a look at it. Really look at that word. Is it working with a different sound? Is there another reason we had to change the sound of it or maybe change the spelling of it? Compare some other words together. Are there things that maybe also follow this pattern or look the same like this that don't fit in that big realm? Then maybe these are things that have a different pattern that we should look at. Okay, so for example, we have things like word families with ear, okay, with that vowel being EA. Could be that vowel team. Fear, tear, dear. Okay. Now, we also have a spelling pattern, ear. Okay. Thinking about some of these words. Take a look at this list here, this chart. Right. These words should be different from a word family. Okay. Some of these things don't necessarily fit in a word family. They follow some different patterns that we have. Okay. So just looking at all of those different things, there's a lot that goes into some of the same sounds and same letters, not all fitting in the same way. And again, this is another example of why our English language is complicated and confusing for students. But these are things like this. This is something that we can help work through them with by looking at the different sounds we hear, looking at some of the things that they see, and understanding the difference between, like we said, those patterns and word families. Again, the more practice they have with some of these things, the more exposure they have, the easier these things will get for them. And unfortunately, there's not just one magic answer that's going to help every student. Just practicing that continued repetition, giving them, like we've talked about, those decodables, continually having them work through that stuff and practice with it is going to be the most beneficial thing for them. Okay, second thing for your phonics notebooks today is irregular word families. Okay, so irregular word families. We think of these as people or families that they don't play fair, is what we like to say. They don't follow the rules, but they can be grouped together into word families. Okay, so these are kind of your outliers that don't necessarily fit with what you're trying to talk about at the time. Some phonics programs might call them glued words, depending, and I don't know which exact programs use that term, but if you do hear that word, glued families, the same thing. It's irregular word families. Okay, it's just maybe another visual or something that students can think about when they're thinking of these irregular word families. Okay, um, these are things like ind. Okay, in this case, the vowel is long, ind. Okay, like find, kind, hind. Okay, in all. Okay, we can't say that. Now we know, I know we talked about the floss rule where we double the consonant at the end, and that's sometimes what kids come to when they see all. However, that's not necessarily, it's great that they can think that way, but that's not really the pattern we're looking at. It's that all, that's just a L influenced vowel, and that all just gets grouped together there. So not really something that we think of, oh, we put the extra L because of, Sammy loves fried zebras is what we call it, the floss rule, but that's not necessarily the case. If that helps students kind of remember something, that's great, but in this case is not really the true reason why we're doing that. Okay. IGHT, vowel is long again. And then that ANK, where we same thing, we have that long vowel sound. Typically we don't see with words like that. Okay, so some standards. And these are things, again, most of the time I know I use just that basic, like know and apply grade level phonics. You can use some of these other ones, and this may be one that you hear being used with these word families. Again, I think in most cases, if you just use that general know and apply grade level phonics, nobody's really going to think too much of it. Okay. Again, with first grade, so that one, last one was kindergarten. This is the first grade. Same thing. They're reading and recognizing grade appropriate, irregularly spelled words. So that does kind of fit in with that word family pattern, what we were just talking, irregular word family patterns, what we were just talking about there. Okay, so kind of jumping ahead a little bit more. And again, please feel free to pause this at any point if you need to catch up on things, need to review something. If you do have your Val Valley paper, please take that out. And what I want you to do is filling in this AUAW. I think we may have done or talked about this last week, but if you have not filled that in, I just wanted to make sure we did so. Both fitting underneath that saw picture. AAU and AW both say aw. Okay. Now, as you, and even as you're just looking at your Val Valley chart, think about the different mouth placements you make when you're saying some of these different sounds. So you can simply go, from one side where you see feet all the way over to, or even just go to the middle. Okay. Go through that and just take a look at yourself. Like, how is your mouth looking? If I was teaching this to students, where would I tell them to place their mouth? And I've seen actual, some teachers take actual pictures of students' mouths and putting them on top of these different symbols so that they can see the symbol. They can also see like the mouth placement. Maybe that's something where you have mirrors, like look in front of a mirror. If you have a phone or something like that, tell them to do that at home, or you do it yourself so you can understand what your mouth should be looking like. If you have Chromebooks, there's that camera feature. Getting them to see that their mouth is making a different position helps a lot with them understanding the sound they're trying to make. So if they know that feet is that tight smile where they're making their mouth look that way, and they are, maybe doing something from way over on the other side, that open mouth right in the middle, they know that something's not right in producing that sound. So maybe that helps them fix the sound they are saying so that they're able to put it in the correct pronunciation as they're saying a certain word. Okay, so something to kind of keep in mind. I've seen kids use mirrors before, all sorts of different stuff for you to do that with. Okay, third thing for your phonics notebook today is something called sliders, or diphthongs is the more appropriate term for it. A lot of times, though, with kids, we use the term sliders, and it just makes a little more sense. The word diphthongs is kind of crazy for them to think about. And the word slide, as you see here, um, kind of shows you how you are producing that sound. Okay, so a diphthong is not a blend. It's something where you're kind of meshing these sounds together or sliding into them. Okay, so these are things you can take a second to do this. So make your mouth into the round sound, like you're saying octopus, and slide it into a smile sound like oi. Okay, do you see how your mouth is moving? Right, and again, these are things you can do with your kids. As they're doing that, they're going to see, okay, these sounds are like sliding together, and that's what a diphthong is, or a slider, we might call them. Okay, so those sounds kind of being blended together, but not where we hear, both separate sounds like we do in a blend. Okay. So any of these things you are welcome to kind of try. And it does work with kids, like I said, to let them see their sounds and have them do this, because I think it does help them to realize that their mouth does move as they say different words. They're not just opening their mouth wide to say these different sounds. They have to move their mouth in different ways and open it and do different things. So great way, and it's some great examples for them to do that. Okay. So again, this is the two vowels that are kind of in that single syllable, in that one syllable sound. They are sliding or gliding together. You might hear gliding in different programs as well. Most people call them sliders. I'm gonna guess most um, programs have that term. They may give you the diphthong version, but then just know that you can use the word sliders as well, and that hopefully helps them kind of get there a little bit easier. Um, a difficult thing for some ELL students, because diphthongs aren't something that exists in a lot of other languages. So thinking about um, kind of really focusing on that and doing those different mouth movements for them to kind of see the difference between those sounds may help them to realize, okay, it's not really just one letter that I'm focusing on. It's like this combination of these things together. It's like this separate way that I'm producing this sound. Okay. And there are some other sounds for English language learners that are difficult, just simply because they're sounds that aren't produced in different languages. So in our English language, we have a lot of weird things like that where they have to kind of learn how to do that, and hearing examples of it, looking at mouth placements, things like that will definitely help them along with some of that stuff. So you have a couple new things you can add into your Val Valley if you do have it out. If not, we can review it again next week during class. So we have OUOW, okay, making that ow sound. That's that diphthong. And if you look down at the very bottom left-hand corner, you have your diphthong places right there. So OUOW going underneath the owl, and then that OIOY going there underneath. I think it's supposed to be oil, is what you have there. So make sure you fill those in on your paper. Okay, well, jumping into the fourth thing for your phonics notebook today, OO versus OO. Kind of interesting. And this is something, sometimes if I ever teach this, I like to have this kind of pulled up, because they're like, what is this? What is going on? I'm like, but they make different sounds. So I like to do exploratory stuff with it where, if they have these different sounds up here, um, let kids start to come up with some words that have these vowels in them. Okay. And you can then put them all on your board. Then let the kids look at them and sort them. Well, are they making different sounds? Which words are making the same sounds? And how can we separate between the two? Okay. So again, put that in your phonics notebook, because it is an important thing to have in there as well. So we typically call these ambiguous vowels. Some resources call it a diphthong. Really kind of just take a look at the program that your district is using. and decide what you want to use in terms of calling it and how you use it with your students. But either wording can be correct. Just kind of depends on what you're looking at. So there's that short sound and the long sound. Okay, so if you're looking at words like book, cookies, that whereas if you have words like school or booze, okay, it's that longer sound. And that's something, like I said, I like to have kids kind of make their own list, and then they start to sort those words out. And they're like, oh, they do make different sounds. It's not the same sound, even though it's the same two exact letters. So kind of a crazy thing. So if you are looking at that, oops, that is not correct. What you really should have there, um, so this is not what I want you to write there. You are filling in, can't draw very well with this. You are going to add in your OO and OO. And if you take a look at your Val Valley page, you have two places where you're going to fill that in. Okay, one being that book, that that short sound, and then one being the moon, that ooh sound. Okay, make sure you add those in there as well. I apologize for that being correct. So you don't have to worry about this side. We're just adding in that OO for both of those. All right, moving on. Something that we may call whiners, and I think this is a fun way to kind of let kids know and give them a little bit more connection with what's going on. If we teach these teams these different diphthongs or sliders as whiners, okay? So think of it as I don't want to. Okay, so that AU or AW, that aw sound, the OU, excuse me, ow, that hurt. Okay, so think of someone that's, there's always somebody that gets hurt and that they're constantly complaining. And this is kind of what you're thinking of, that OI, oy vey, that's terrible. And then the I'm telling, or if you have the that EW, UE, UI, that I'm telling, right? Either one of those kind of fits in that. But these are the whiners, we like to call them. So if you're thinking of getting hurt and not feeling great, these are the people that whine around. Okay, so those are the diphthongs that we teach with that, or the sliders, whatever word, whatever term you want to use with them. And here's some more examples, kind of taking a look. So these are vowel team syllables with the talkers and the whiners. Right, so the talkers like aim, play, okay? And obviously you can go through and read those. I'm not going to read them all for you, all examples, but fun ways to teach it with those whiners. They're like, these two letters are making up a new vowel sound, whereas the talkers really just making that long sound, kind of saying one of the sounds that's already there. Just different than the brand new sound that is being made by the whiners. Okay, talkers, they just say what's already there. A good way to think about it. So some fun stuff, and I know that kids kind of get into doing all these different things. They love to make all the whiner sounds and kind of go through those different lists there. So something fun to try. The next piece of this, just kind of showing you again that our language can be a little bit crazy, but this is really showing you the most common or the highest percentaged way to pronounce certain combinations of vowel digraphs or vowel teams, whatever you want to call them. Really something you could show your kids, in that, hey, well, most of the time when we see this, this is the sound we're going to make. However, there obviously are those outliers, but if you teach them, especially these ones that are like high 90 percentages, if you teach them just that one way where you're showing that, typically they'll see that and then be able to apply it a little bit more. Just know that there's another way you can produce that sound. So if you get stuck and it doesn't look right, try this instead. Okay, so kind of crazy that sometimes down here, like we have all these, this EI, sometimes long, sometimes short, kind of just a crazy mix. Sometimes it's a long E, sometimes it's a short I. It really is just this weird combination of different letters, which is again why English is crazy and confusing. So, something kind of just interesting for you to see there. The ambiguous vowels. These are that sequence, that's letter sound correspondent that may be interrupted. Diphthong, two separate vowels, vowel and a consonant. Again, let me try to play this for you. If it does not work for you to be able to hear it.
This week we are exploring ambiguous vowels. What are ambiguous vowels? Why ambiguous? What meaning? This week we are looking at vowel patterns that are ambiguous. They are called ambiguous because it is not clear which vowels are making the sound. The vowel sound is neither short nor long. You won't be listening to the word and how it is spelled because the sounds are ambiguous. It could be spelled a different number of ways. To make ambiguous vowels even trickier, the same sound can be written a number of different ways, and the same spelling can produce different sounds. Let's look at the ambiguous vowel pattern OU. It can make O, as in dough, or oo, as in through. This might be tricky. Let's go. Let's have a look at three ambiguous vowel patterns. AW, AU, AL. These vowel patterns can all make the OR sound. Same sound, but completely different spelling. This is why they are called ambiguous. Let's look at some more words with these ambiguous vowels. First word has the vowel pattern AW. The word is awesome. The vowel pattern is making the OR sound. Awesome. Second word has the vowel pattern AU. This word is autumn. This vowel pattern is also making an OR sound. Autumn. And lastly, the third word shows the AL vowel pattern. The word is always. You can hear the OR sound again at the beginning of this word. Always. One sound, three different spellings. AW, AU, and AL. Ambiguous vowel patterns AW, AU, and AL all make the OR sound. They all sound the same, but are spelled three different ways. They also sound like they might be spelled with an O, but in fact, all A's. This is why they are called ambiguous. To remember these words, you will have to use your visual spelling knowledge. Try looking for more words this week that have AW, AU, or AL. Have fun. This week we are.
Sorry, guys. That wasn't. Okay, there we go. All right, so kind of fitting in with that, standards, again, like I said, a lot of times we use just that very general, but if you really look a little closer, you could potentially also use that no spelling sound correspondences for additional common vowel teams. So that kind of fits in with that. Again, a lot of these phonics standards don't necessarily hit with a very specific, like it's not going to say, oh, we're learning about ambiguous vowels or R controlled vowels. You're really just looking at kind of the sound relationships, and this is something that would possibly fit in with that. Okay. Next thing for your phonics notebook, these final consonant patterns, sometimes, a lot of times we call them blockers. And that's typically the more kid-friendly language. We call them blockers, and you will see why here in just a second. Let me see if this will play for you.
Slow forward. Okay. Can see a lot. Say. Hey. Babble. Use the computer seek. Just okay. Listen. Oh, okay. Here it comes. Look. Just okay. Just okay.
So a fun little video that you can also show your kids, get them kind of in that idea of being that blocker, kind of that ending sound that kind of is only used in certain cases where we're blocking, that protecting that vowel like they referenced here. So there we go. Okay. So stops a vowel, it stops an inflectional ending from changing the vowel. So TH versus TCH, the K versus CK, GE versus DGE. Okay, and here's so really again, this only works, and there's some examples here coming up. But this is something that really only works with a short vowel in a one syllable word. If that is not the case, typically that is not going to apply to the pattern's not going to work. And now this is just in that base word. Obviously, there's endings we can add and stuff like that to the word, but if it doesn't have that in its base, that single short vowel, one syllable, these patterns will not work for it. That's kind of the general thing with them. But a whole bunch of different examples and things. And these are things, again, you could have your kids kind of pull some of these up, put these words out and let the kids look at them. Okay, so what is it I'm looking at in these cases? Okay, in our first example, these are all vowel digraphs or vowel teams, we might call them. Okay, EA, OA. Okay, those are things that we put together. In the second thing here, these are just short vowels that have N. Last one, these are short vowels with that CK. So when we have that N, it's a little bit different because, again, those are typically sometimes considered families, the word families, like I and K, A and K. Sometimes it just is that, that NK ending where we see that. Different than the CK, the blocker there. Okay, same thing again. You're going to recognize that all sorts of different things we have in the same way, where we have TCH versus just CH. If it's a vowel digraph, a vowel team, we just use that CH for the ending. If we have short vowels and we have that N in it, typically, again, just that CH. If there's a short vowel with T, okay, that's where we see the TCH. Again, very confusing a lot of times because of all the just different examples and different ways we can make this work. But if you start to think of, obviously when you're teaching these things, you're not going to teach them all at the same time, all at once. Okay, focus on your vowel teams, focus on your word families, focus on those different things, and then students can kind of start to see that they all are together. Okay, again, falling in that trap of DGE or just GE. Okay, long vowels. Long vowel sound with that A, final E. Short vowels with friend, okay? Let's arge, orge, okay? And then the short vowels with D, DGE, edge, okay? Going through all that list there. All right, now, TCH, DGE is a trigraph. Can't talk today. We talk about digraphs as being two things. This case, there's not just two letters, there's three. So it's three letters making that one sound. So then in this case, we call it a trigraph, excuse me. So do we say the T in these words? Hutch, batch, okay? Now, it's a grouping of all these words together. It's making that one sound. So we don't necessarily make a hut, okay? We just say hutch. It's all grouped together in that trigraph. Okay. TCH still says CH, DGH still says J, CK still says that K. Okay. We still hear those sounds, but T is not going to be as broadcasted out as it should be with other words. And that's kind of why it's considered into this trigraph. So why do we need these extra letters? Why do we have to put those extra letters in? Why not just add in the sounds that are there? Okay, basically we're adding inflectional endings to the words without the TCH, without the T, I'm sorry. Okay, so LACH, LACHED, okay, we follow this A, final E. Now, if we have LATCHED, the E can't jump over. Okay, so in this case, we would say lotched. It's that A sound. In this case, T or the E cannot jump over. It's not a long sound. Latch. Making that sound. Okay, crushed doesn't change because the end acts as the block. The N acts as the blocker. Okay, that's the ending. It's not letting that sound change. Roaches doesn't change because we now have this vowel digraph. So kind of some crazy things to think about, again, making the language confusing. But again, as you teach different things, you are not going to teach all of these things at once. Focus on one thing, work with it, practice with it, then get into the reasonings of why. Okay, standards, nothing really that jumps out as this being a specific standard. This is where we kind of just apply that general thing. And again, if you ever get stuck, my suggestion is always just to apply that basic grade level standard, because a lot of times that's exactly where people think of when they think of the phonics, and that's what they're focused on. You may, if you're getting into some more generalized standards, or you want to, in these, so this was in second grade. Again, looking a little closer to second grade, this generalized learn spelling patterns when writing words, cage, badge, boy, boil, okay? More so talking with that language of, standard capitalization, punctuation, when we're thinking about that in terms of other things. So can fit in other places in the standards. Again, I typically tend to just use the very general standard because phonics can kind of apply to a lot of different things. Okay, last thing here for your phonics notebook for today are R-controlled vowels. Controlled R vowels, however you want to say them. We tend to call them R-controlled vowels. Really, they're controlled R vowels. I think old ways of thinking, we kind of phrase it differently. And again, depending what program you're using, they'll probably phrase it differently too. So, kind of jumping ahead here. with, since I can't really draw on board, with our controlled vowel, I've seen a lot of different representations. Typically, for the most part, we see this grumpy letter R, um, and he's the one that he's kind of controlling what's being said with these different things. Okay. However, he is polite and he lets the vowel be first, but he's still the one that wants the credit. He wants the sound. Okay. I've seen this with the R being like a pirate. That way students can kind of think of that R sound. Um, I've seen it, and you can have fun with this. You could let your students kind of create bossy R and let them design what bossy R is going to look like however they want to. But basically, we're thinking of bossy R as being the one controlling the vowel sound. Okay, instead of just saying we're saying okay, all these different sounds, and I'm sure you've heard these before. These are things that are talked about a lot, and I think this is one that's kind of been around for a really long time. So crazy R, bossy R, however you want to teach it. Again, look at what your programs are doing, but different ways that you can do those things. Now, in this little graphic here with car down here, this is really where bossy R comes into play. Like I talked about, we don't say we say R. That is how we are breaking apart that word. That R will not separate from that other vowel. He's kind of latching onto it, controlling it. Again, he's polite and lets vowel go first, but he still wants that vowel with him and connected to him. Okay. Um, W can mess up pronunciation a little bit, like worm, war. But again, those are exceptions that you don't see quite as much of. So teaching it as that controlled sound, um, and then again, referencing it when you get to things that don't quite fit that pattern. AROR at the end of a multisyllabic words, calendar, color, dollar, changes it just a little bit. Um, and then that control R with an extra vowel really changes things too. Bear, there, fear, earn. Not quite the pattern, that R that we are looking at. So those are kind of some exceptions to that as well. Okay. If you want to go ahead and add all of these into your Vowel Valley, if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, that's where you're going to find all of your vowel controlled, it says vowel R. So those are controlled vowels or controlled R, whatever you want to call them. EIR, ER, UR, all going underneath bird, OR with the fork, AR with the arm. So you can fill those in as well. And next week we can kind of pull ours up and make sure we have everything that we need to in those different Vowel Valley places. So by the end, you should have all of them sorted out. Okay. Again, could fit into a standard of knowing spelling sound correspondences and additional common vowel teams. We think of it more so as that, remember, it's controlling the vowel. So it's kind of considered a vowel team here for reference to standard. Again, that same basic standard of just knowing and applying phonics skills is important too. Okay. Quickly gonna do a phonological awareness review here. And then the in-class activity, like I said, will kind of be more of an out-of-class thing. And I'm going to talk about looking ahead here just a little bit. So phonological awareness, phonemic awareness. Phonological awareness is everything. It covers all of this stuff. You're able to hear and manipulate the spoken sounds of words and sentences. Okay, phonemic awareness is also part of that. It's that ability to work with individual sounds and phonemes in spoken words. Okay, phonological awareness just covers a lot more than just what phonemic awareness does. And I really like this graphic because I do think it breaks it apart really well. So even if you take this slide and print it off, just kind of for reference for you, you could kind of see, these manipulations, segmenting, blending, those all fall in this phonemic awareness, which is also part of phonological awareness. But some of these other things are also involved with that. So why we don't all group it together. Might make it a little more easier. It might make it a little easier for everybody, but that is not the case. Okay. So phonological awareness, you're thinking of all these different things. Okay. Again, these are things you could print out, have these references, sometimes just seeing it in different ways and seeing different patterns, different examples might help you understand pieces of it just a little bit more. All things we've talked about, discussed, but again, sometimes just seeing it one more time kind of does help us a little bit. Okay, so what are the 6 skills of phonemic awareness? And they're all listed right there for you. So this is phonemic awareness. Remember, this is just a piece of the huge umbrella of phonological awareness. Okay? Isolating sounds, segmenting, adding, blending, deleting, substituting. These are things, again, if you have this, you're able to manipulate sounds and words, changing different things within them. Okay, this is something, again, we talk about, you should be able to do this with your eyes closed. I do a lot of phonemic awareness like this, with any of these blending, adding, whatever, while we're lining up or transitioning. You can have students do that. They don't need anything in their hand. They don't need to do anything. Now, if they are struggling with it, that is something you can do as an intervention, but something that they can do just by listening, which is something what makes it a good and easy transition for a lot of people. Okay, so that is just a quick review. I know that is kind of confusing. That's one of the most confusing concepts, the difference between phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. Having different visuals, like I said, print those off, use those to help you. Hopefully that helps kind of understand the difference between those things for you. Okay. For this in-class activity, this is what I'm going to have you do and turn in for your week 4 participation. Really what you are going to do is create an activity for something you could do in a large group, small group, something during a transition time, and a center activity. And let me move ahead here. These are the different groups. Whatever group you are in for your mock lesson, that's the skill I want you to focus on. So if you are group 1, you're going to focus on concept of words. Group 3, you can do alliteration. I think there's one group, I don't remember which number is blank because remember we had some different groupings. If you really get stuck and you're not sure, you can definitely use that one too. It makes me no difference. But what this works or how this is going to work for you, you are filling in the box for 4 activities. If you want to kind of create your own chart in some way, great, you can do that. I will put a template. It will be in Pilot by the time I probably release this to you. So it should be there already. You can fill this in on my template. If you have another way of doing it, that is completely fine too. Really, I'm just looking for these 4 activities, okay? So in each box, you're going to have something different here, okay? 2 of the 4 activities, so it doesn't matter if it's a large group or center one, are going to be oral only. 2 will be including letters and words. Kind of your choice. And honestly, if you get stuck and you can't come up with 2 of each, do whatever you can come up with. Just because I know I'm not going to be there to help out with you. So if you get stuck on one of those, I'll just accept any 4 activities. At least you have to have one for each box. So something you could do as a large group, small group, transition, center. Something you do with small group and center, even large group. A lot of those things could be pretty similar, but try to find some different stuff for what you're doing there. Thinking about maybe some multi-sensory where you have, beads or Play-Doh or puppets people have used before. Okay, so trying to think of something that you could use. Now, obviously, when you're transitioning, you can't really have a lot of materials like that because the kids are going to be up and moving around. but there are other ways to kind of do those things. So in each box, you're kind of going to say your activity title, um, listing the materials you need. Some of them you may not need a whole lot, and that's okay. And then just basic, simple directions. Okay. You don't have to write out like a full lesson plan, but just give me like, okay, first do this, listing as bullet points if you need to. Okay. Um, I will have you, I'll give you a couple choices with this. If you do it digitally, if you can submit that to the Dropbox, I will put a Dropbox out for you, and it'll just say week 4 participation. If you do it digitally, please do that. Otherwise, at the beginning of class next week, I will check in with your paper copy of this if you have it done that way. Um, I'm hoping most of us do it digitally. And then my idea is that maybe I can just create some sort of folder or resource section in our pilot page where you can then, if everyone's okay with sharing, you could download everybody's and have all those different ideas so that you could use them in your future classroom in some way. Okay. So kind of thinking of that if that is an option for you. So if you do it digitally, it might be a little easier for us to share those out for everybody. Even if you do it paper, pencil, if you have a way to scan it in and post it that way in that Dropbox, that'd be wonderful. And then we can kind of share those around. So you guys have that big group of resources for everybody. Okay. If you have questions with this, please let me know. Like I said, I kind of changed it a little bit in that your 4 activities, I do not need 2 of each. If you can come up with 2 of each, great. If not, just do 4 activities, trying to consider some multi-sensory stuff too. Okay. We may share if we have time. I'm thinking more so, like I said, doing like a folder that you can kind of look at everybody else's and get some ideas, hopefully, for the future. Okay. So again, those are the groupings if you need to kind of check in with what you are going to be doing. And then let me know if you need any help with that. Okay. So mock lessons, we are obviously not doing those tonight. Those groups that we talked about, please be prepared for next week. Please come prepared. We may go full time next week. We're pushing for some time. And if there are some groups that don't get to share, just be ready next week. We'll see if we can get all that stuff and squeeze it in there. Okay. Last thing I want to talk briefly to you about before I let you go. Our next big project that we have, we are going to be doing this phonics student study. I know I gave you a paper at the very beginning, first week of class, a letter that you can give to your CT to hopefully help you pick out a student that you might want to work with at your placement. I know I've talked to a couple of you. If you have a niece or nephew, younger brother or sister, cousin, anybody else that's kind of within that range that you can help or they can, you can work with one-on-one, totally fine with you doing that. Just make sure they kind of fall within that and you are doing all those different things with them. Okay. You're going to end up giving them 3 assessments. We start doing this around week 6, do week 9. We're going to discuss some assessment results, write an assessment analysis, and you can kind of see when all of these things are due, getting approval to teach something, and that's from me, just a phonics skill, creating a hands-on game, and creating and implementing a lesson plan that includes a game. Okay, so we're starting now. Really, I want you to make sure you've selected your student. I kind of start thinking about that. What you will find in pilot, if you go into our syllabus, you will find in this whole section where it talks about it, there's a paper that says student profile. If you click on that, it'll give you this paper where you can, once you know who your student is, you can start filling out some of that stuff. And that does not have to be a typed thing. You can just print it off and fill in the blanks or just write it down on a separate piece of paper is fine. But as long as you have that information, then we will start to, in the data discourse is where we'll start to kind of talk about that and just explain that student and their place and where they're at just a little bit more. So kind of using your time to start thinking of a student, just getting a little information from them if you have some time. And then we'll talk a little bit more about this next time too, what we need to do next. Just try to stay up on these dates. If you don't, it's just going to be a lot for you to catch up as we're doing all the different things back to back. So kind of just making sure you stay on track with this so we don't have anyone falling too far behind, because if you notice, week 14 is when that stuff is due, kind of the whole thing is due. Doesn't really give you a lot of extra time at the end of the semester to, catch up if you need extra time. So let's really try to focus and get those things kind of caught up here. So again, we'll talk a little bit more about this next week as well, but this is your first step is really to select student. And again, your CT may be able to help you with that. Or if you're doing somebody outside of that, that's completely fine too. Okay. Yeah, and like I said, really all the information I just talked about here is the student profile, like I said, filling it in, kind of just listing some different stuff here. The biggest piece, I do want you to come up with a different name for the child. I don't want you to use their name. This could be a completely strange, you can call him Batman. Okay. The crazier it is, the more I believe that it's actually a made up name and not just you forgetting to change the name. So keep it crazy. That's completely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe it's their favorite, character, whoever. It really makes me no difference. So decide that, and you can start filling that out as well. And then I think that is really all, and I cannot get this to move over so I can get back to my other stuff. So bear with me for a second. Here we go. Okay. So next week, if you have not done so already, please make sure you submit any vocabulary you have from weeks 1 to 3. If you did that paper pencil, like I said, at the beginning of next class, let me just kind of look through it so I can give you that grade for it. If you have a digital copy of it, just submit it into Pilot so we have that there for us. Still have a reading response for next week, looking at chapter 7. Don't forget to add your vocab, add to your notebook. Really only 3 vocab for this week, so not too much more to add. Student project, just making sure you're picking a student, kind of getting an idea of that, and then starting to fill out that profile if you can. And then our mock lessons, really anybody 1 to 7. That actually should say 1 to 6. Anybody 1 to 6. Okay. Be prepared. We may not get to all of those, but be prepared for that. Okay. Same thing as always. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Otherwise, you should have a good start on what you need to for our class to kind of make up for that. And vocabulary, those are those 3 you need to fit in there. And then your phonics notebook stuff. Feel free to go back and listen again if you need to. Again, please reach out to me if you have any questions, and I will help you as soon as I can. Otherwise, have an awesome night, awesome weekend, and I will see you next Thursday. Bye, guys.